Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Therein. I'm an attorney by profession and also the founder of a platform called Sustain Law, which is a platform dedicated to empowering women through legal education. Now, those of you who've been following my social media pages know that this month I've been speaking about employment law. And with specific reference to employment law, I've been speaking about the employment contract because that is the founding document of the relationship between you and your employer. And in the event of a dispute, that is the first document that you should go back to find out what process should be followed in resolving the dispute. Now, from a very high level review perspective, I would like to discuss some of the terms that I believe you should be looking out for in your employment contract. Now, I know some of you may have been very, very excited when you were signing or when you received your employment contract, that some of the terms in the contract, you probably just browsed through them and you didn't really understand them. And also find that it's very few people who actually, give their employment contracts to somebody that they trust so that the person can review the contract and explain any terms they don't understand. And it's even fewer people who go back to their prospective employer or to the HR department to say, these are the terms that I do not understand in this contract. Can you explain it to me, or can you send me a revised contract that is in simple and easy to understand language before I sign this document? I know a lot of you, from excitement, you just sign the contract and send it back to the HR or to your prospective employer, and then only years or months later, when a dispute arises, do you start panicking about the document that you signed at the start of your employment relationship. So back to the terms that I think that every prospective employee should look out for before signing, or just after signing, or even if you've been employed for a few years and you just want to remind yourself of some of your obligations, then reviewing your employment contract is a good place to start. In order for you to understand how you should be conducting yourself in the working environment and how you should raise any issues of concern, or how you should go about disciplinary procedures or reporting sexual harassment incidences, and so forth. So without any further ado, here are the 5 things that I believe every employee should look out for in their employment contract. First, at the top of my list, and from a personal perspective, it is the probation period. I know a lot of you first go look at the payment terms and try to understand what your salary structure is going to be like. But some of the, less exciting things that you should look out for are the probation period. For me, this is personal because I once worked at a company where the probation period was 6 months, and I really thought that was long, because the type of the industry that I was in at the time really didn't warrant the 6 months of probation. And I thought it was a way for the employer to just have you without having to commit for the first 6 months, and then basically you being disposable at the end of the 6 months of your probation. But honestly, in terms of the industry you're in, probation could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, and I've even heard in some cases the probation period is 12 months. So probation period is one of the terms that you should look out for, and understand what is expected from you during that probation period. It is obviously a period that allows for your employer to figure out whether or not you're a good fit for the company, or whether or not you're competent for the job that you've been assigned to. And during that probation period, I would advise you to also, depending on how long or how short your probation period is, you need to set up a review, or what do they call it? What is it called? You need to set up review. No, that's not the word I'm looking for. Guys, the word won't come to me right now. But you need to make sure that, if you are maybe going to do probation period for 3 months, every month you need to go back to your employer or your supervisor, whoever your manager is at the time, and you need to ask them whether or not you're on track with where you should be in terms of the work that you're doing or the training that you're doing, whether or not you're understanding how the company works, whether or not you're understanding what your specific role entails. So like I said, every month you go back and you review the previous month and you ask your employer, where can I improve? What did I do well on? What is the expectation for the next month? And what is the expectation if I am going to be retained after the probation period? I think it's within your best interest to set up those kind of meetings, just so you have an understanding of how far along you are coming in comparison to your peers or previous people who've worked in that position. The last thing you want is for the 3 months or the 6 months or even the year to come to an end and your employer just says you're not competent for the job, and you'll be surprised because you never actually had a sit down with your employer to find out whether or not you are on track during your probation period. Another thing that I want women specifically to look out for is their maternity leave. Every contract should have a maternity leave clause, which will tell you whether or not your maternity is unpaid or paid. It is not uncommon for your maternity leave to be unpaid. And if that's the case, you'll have to go through the admin of claiming through the UIF. You also need to find out how much maternity leave you have in a specific cycle. So I know some companies say that you can only be pregnant twice in that 3-year cycle, for example, meaning that you'd be away from work for 8 months if you're going to take the full 4 months on your maternity leave. And also you need to find out whether you have to pay back that maternity leave before you resign, for example, or whether or not you don't have to pay it back. Because with some companies, if you take 4 months off and you come back and only serve a month and then resign, then you sort of have to pay back those 3 months if you were on paid leave. But like I said, that is another clause that you need to check to see what is in your specific contract. Don't listen to what your friend or all the siblings said about their own work experiences. You must always go to your contracts because that is what speaks to your relationship with your employer. So do check out the maternity clause. And for specific industries, it is ethical for you to disclose when you're pregnant, just so that your employer, depending on how dangerous the environment is, just so that your employer can give you a more suitable role during your pregnancy, so that you don't have to put yourself and your baby in danger. Like literally, for example, maybe if you work at a mine, you might be given a more administrative role than a intensive labor role, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then another thing you should look out for when it comes specifically to maternity is that you should know that by virtue of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, you have 6 weeks minimum of maternity leave. So make sure that your contract doesn't say 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever the case is, anything less than what the Basic Conditions of Employment Act stipulates. You do have 6 weeks, even if you gave birth to a stillborn child or if you had a miscarriage. Another clause that I would encourage you to look out for is your working hours. Your working hours are very important, even if you're working from home. I'm laughing because I know my friends are a little bit guilty of not always working their full 8 hours or the hours that are in line with their employment contracts. And I know some of you are also guilty of this too. But if you're expected to work from 9 to 5, then please clock in or switch on your laptop at 9 o'clock. I know some companies have a way of tracking this, but switch on your laptop at 9 o'clock and then log off at 5 o'clock. And I really hope that, while you are logged in, you are being productive and actually using the time to complete the tasks that you've been given by your employer, or at least to research more on your role to find out how you can be of value to your employer. So on some days when you're not as busy, try other things that will contribute towards making you the best employee or making you the best in your specific role. There's nothing wrong with that, but you do still have to adhere to the working hours, like I said, and also just again, going back to the issue of overtime, just see what it says in terms of payment for overtime, how many hours you're expected of overtime per week, or how many regular hours you must work per week. So check out the clause that refers to the hours of work. Another clause that I think is important for you to familiarize yourself with is the dispute resolution clause. This generally sets out what steps you should take when you are, or what steps will be taken against you when there is a disciplinary hearing. Usually an employer has a separate policy for disciplinary hearings, but on a high level review, you might find that under the dispute resolution clause, it will stipulate what needs to happen, the procedure that needs to take place in order for you to be dismissed or, to have a disciplinary hearing. Another clause that I want you to pay attention to is the annual leave clause, the sick leave clause, and the religious holiday leave clauses. Those are the three main, and family responsibility. Those are the four main ones that I want you to familiarize yourself with. Familiarize yourself with how many days in a cycle you're allowed to take for annual leave, and if there's a process that has to be followed when you are clocking in your leave. It has to be paid leave, by the way. And also when it comes to religious holiday leave, that's generally at the discretion of the employer. Other than the public holidays that are already noted in our calendars, there are some other religious holidays that you may need to take as as part of your religious beliefs. So please just familiarize yourself with the terms that are in place for those specific holidays. And then what else did I mention? Sick leave, yes, even if you're working from home and you are not going to be clocking in for work on that specific day because maybe you've got COVID and you're maybe you've got COVID and you're recovering, or any other sickness really, you must familiarize yourself with how you clock for that leave and how you get permission for that leave. Remember, if you are sick for more than 2 days in a row, other employers who are more understanding or accommodating say 3 days in a row, but the popular one that I've seen is that if you're sick for 2 or more days, then you have to bring a medical certificate that states that you are not able to work for such and such a period and that you will resume your duties on a said date. Very important to get that medical certificate. And just for something interesting, somebody the other day was asking me about whether a sick note from a traditional healer is valid, and honestly every case is judged on its own merits. So some and it's at the discretion of the employer. Some employers don't understand issues like what it is when you've got the calling or you've got premonitions or whatever the case may be. So that kind of sick leave might not be recognized. But like I said, maybe, have a honest conversation with your employer and bring them up to par with what that traditional or what the specific traditional ritual is that you have to do and how long you will be away from work, and find out whether you guys can come to an agreement. But the most important thing that you must know is that even at court level, every case will be judged on its own merits. So really just, find out from your employer if that is something that they've had to deal with in the past. Even if you're not going into that kind of avenue right now, just find out, be curious, find out what has happened in the past. And then another thing that you should look out for is the family responsibility leave. And that's usually given when a parent, a sibling, or a grandparent, or your child passes away. This also is for adoptive children. So find out how many days you have. Some employers actually do give 5 days and some only give 3 days. And also just familiarize yourself with how many family responsibility days you have in a specific cycle. Another clause that I want you to pay attention to is your favorite clause, obviously, the one that speaks to payment or remuneration. You need to understand, if you work overtime, for example, you need to understand how that payment will work out. You also need to understand whether or not you will be paid on a commission basis, because some companies offer commission and a basic salary. So understand that as well. Understand on which day you will be paid. Some people get paid on the 21st, others get paid on the 25th, others on the 15th, others on the very last day of the month. So have an understanding for what happens, have an understanding of what you are paid for and what is expected from you. Some industries, your salary is fixed no matter if you work 8 hours or 20 hours. I know some of my sisters in law have very, very demanding jobs, and it's not always possible to work 8 hours, and a lot of the time we're expected to work overtime, especially when you are, in the beginning stages and you're not yet at a partner level where you can start delegating some of your tasks. Then it's very important for you to understand that, be that as it may, or regardless of how many hours you work, this is the salary that you're going to get at the end of the month. And the last thing I need you guys to be aware of is termination. The termination clause is very important because this is going to set out the notice periods that you need to adhere to when you are resigning. And it's also going to tell you under which conditions or circumstances your employer can terminate the working relationship between you. So I know with a lot of companies, it's issues like maybe coming drunk to work or being drunk on the job. Issues of sexual harassment can lead to a final warning, for example, or even get you fired, and even issues of criminal proceedings against you can get you fired. Things like stealing from your employer, being dishonest, those are some of the things that or some of the circumstances under which your employer can terminate the working relationship. So yeah, that is the termination clause. Just be aware of what is expected of you. Different industries or different professions require for you to serve a longer notice period, and depending on obviously the tasks that are assigned to you, or depending on your role, you may have to serve 6 weeks as opposed to 2 weeks and do a handover of all your files or whatever the case is. So please do familiarize yourself with those issues as well. And yeah, that is it from me. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed this video, just explaining the different terms that you should look out for in your employment contract. And if you are not already following me on my social media platforms, I encourage you to please follow me, because that is where I share more educational content, and that is where you can get in touch with me easier. I don't always see the YouTube comments unless I am specifically looking for something under the comments. So if you want to get in touch with me quicker, then please do get in touch on all my social media platforms, being sister-in-law. That's at sister_in_law_, and you can also get in touch with me via email. That's advice@sisterinlaw.co.za. That's ADVICE@sisterinlaw, one word, .co.za. You can also check my website out and get yourself the guide, actually the e-guide that I have right now on the website, www.sisterinlaw.co.za. That is www.sisterinlaw.co.za, and on there you'll also find a guide which explains everything legal pertaining to marriage law, marriage contracts, types of marriages, divorce law, child maintenance, and wills and intestate, or dying without a will rather, wills and estate planning. That's what I'm looking to say. I hope you find that guide very, very informative, and I hope it is a document that you will encourage others to also purchase. Please remember, copyright laws apply, so do not just email it to people, but encourage other people to also educate and empower themselves by getting themselves a copy of my e-guide. Thank you so much, and if you haven't subscribed, please remember to subscribe right now, and see you next time. Bye.